Hello everybody, I'm here today to talk about backgrounds. I recently did a video looking at my own work and reviewing some of the backgrounds that I have drawn and kind of why they work, why they don't work. And today I'm going to be looking at some comics submitted by our community and go over the same thing, talking about backgrounds that work, backgrounds that don't, what you can do to make improvements, and hopefully this will help anyone watching when deciding on what backgrounds to create in their own work. To start, I'm looking at a comic called Exiled and Not Forgotten by Super Anonymous. All the comics will be linked down below. Okay, so starting with this first sequence from Exiled. It has a really great setup with background. For one, we start with this lovely establishing shot where we see the house, and then we see into the house. We're looking like through a room into our characters. There's this nice kind of implication of like zooming in from external to internal of the house, and then we get some lovely like focus on our characters. And I just love the backgrounds for this setup. For one, like I said, we've got by use of like an exterior and then an interior, it's just got great like kind of cinematic flow, great kind of environmental storytelling, kind of telling our reader where we are. And I love that once we have like the setting set up with our first two panels, I like how you go down here and we get kind of like an emotional read. I really like the use of the lighting, where you've got these like nice warm backgrounds that are contrasting with like the silhouette cool shadows on our characters. And I like the use of like a darker gradient behind the father character, and it's a little lighter behind the daughter character. It's just nice. It's the colors that you've chosen, the subtle gradients. They really suit the emotion that's going on, because they're just playing like a fun card game kind of thing. But I like how there's like this heightened emotion just from some very subtle gradients and color choices and simple backgrounds. And like you didn't need to take these two backgrounds and make them super detailed. They can be super simple. We're just focusing on the characters, the emotions of the situation. It's really nice. Just a very well set up environment. And I do like how it continues through the rest of the scene, where we kind of pull out and there's like a little breather, I guess, where like, it was set up as this intense situation, but it's fine. They're playing cards with the family, And again, the backgrounds work really well. We have some nice continuity from here with the daughter, same kind of colored background that you used, but it's now a little less, the lighting is a little less intense because the situation is less intense. We're alleviating the tension here. I like just the simple use of like the table and then a little bit of the wall here, because we're just focused on the cards and the hands. I think that's great. And yeah, the framing of everything is very consistent across the page. I like how you keep coming back to the same view of the table. That definitely helps with like keeping things easy to read, easy to follow. It's a nice landmark, and having it in the same position as well helps the reader kind of understand what we're looking at. Everything makes sense spatially because of the way you have framed all of the backgrounds in a similar way, where you're only breaking it to do close-ups of like characters or of cards, which are important for the scene. So I think that's a great use of backgrounds. And I also really liked from this first scene where the first transition away from the view of the table is a little flash of the kitchen. Now, it's very subtle, but I really like the continuity of it because it's easy to understand. So you may think, looking at this, where you just see a kitchen and you're like, if this was a page on its own, I'd be like, where the heck is this? There's a little bit of context because the mom is looking over here, and later you see the father looking this way. So it's kind of implied that the mother is like over in this area somewhere just because of how they're looking at each other. But if we go back to the first page, there's a little subtle hint where we've got these kind of like different colored walls. We see a little fridge. We see some counters leading into the room, so that when 2 pages later we come back, we see the mom in the kitchen. We can understand, like, we subtly understand already that the kitchen is like just off scene here. It's where we entered the scene from. So I think that's really great. Just some subtle little background pieces that really help set up the scene. We understand like the layout of this house, and it's used in very subtle ways. The backgrounds are used to your advantage to like frame things well. I just think this is a really solid opening scene, really great background use. And then, because part of this review series we're doing is I have to say something nice, and then I have to say something that needs improvement. We're going to go to this next scene where there's lots of great background stuff. Like, I think the fundamentals here are the same. Like, I think there's a good sense of like, and like when to show scenery and when to show like a close-up of a character or an object. But there are some issues with these next 3 pages. So this first page here, I think, is a great setup. Again, there's this very like kind of cinematic idea of setting up a setting. So I've neglected a page that came before this that was more establishing shot of like our main character going to a bar. But I really like how we get a few shots of like different tables around this bar. Like we see someone taking an order here, someone sitting at the bar. We see another table where people are, drinking and fighting, it looks like. We get a shot of our main character walking in. We get a sense of like kind of where these tables are, how big the room is. And then we get a close-up of like the characters that he's come to meet. And then we get a little close-up of their reaction to him. And then we get the table. So I think this is like some nice use of the space, kind of setting up the setting. Some of the colors are a little repetitive. I do like that you use the lighter brown of the chairs and then the green of these cabinets to kind of signify kind of different spaces. They are becoming like visual landmarks within this scene. However, I think overall there's an issue with the color of like the walls and the floors versus the tables. They're very close in value, meaning like how light and dark. They're very close value-wise, and they're very close color-wise. So they kind of blend together a little bit. And there's so much of it that it does become a little repetitive, and I just wish there were more details to help differentiate it. Maybe some different color choices to help make some of the scenery pop out from the background. Some of it kind of blends together, like kind of behind here it blends, it really blends in here. And it gets a little better as we kind of pull into our main characters. But there still is a lot of just kind of similar color going through in our backgrounds. So I think if maybe like the walls or the ceiling were lightened up, or maybe some texture was added, just something to break it up a little bit, I think would be helpful. And I think that kind of builds into the main problem I noticed with the backgrounds in this scene, is that they get a little repetitive and they become a little flat. Now, again, I think there's a very good sense with Exiled of when to show background and when to pull background away to focus on the characters or the dialogue. And I think that's done here very well. I like that we get these little pulled out shots where we show the characters sitting around the table. It's good reminders of where everyone is. We get to see all their reactions to each other. And then we still get these nice close-ups of like, dealing cards, their reactions. Yeah, it's just a good choice of like when to show background, what background to show, but it's a lot of just the same color over and over and over and over. So again, I think if some color choices were changed, if some of the setting details were changed so it's not just like a field of like the brown of the walls, I think that would help quite a lot. It was done really well in the first scene, where on this first page, to really capture the emotion of like what's going on, you used some very like nice subtle color changes where you used like a darker gradient here and a lighter gradient here. I think something similar to that on this page as well as this page, I think would have really helped with understanding the tone, making things stand out more, things feeling less repetitive. I think it really would have strengthened these pages because these panels feel very repetitive. It's a lot of the same background color, 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 same background color. It just gets kind of repetitive, and I think it takes away from the emotion of the scene. A lot of it would just take some color changes to really stand out. Next, I wanted to look at a webtoon format comic. Because for all of these, I was mostly looking at like single page, like kind of graphic novel style comics, but I wanted to look at a webtoon style because, I don't know, the same fundamentals apply. So this comic is called The Not Spider by Ghost. And it's a very cute comic. I really like a lot of the design work. I like the story. I love the little knot spider. And I think overall, the backgrounds in this comic are very good. They're well done. I think overall there's a very good sense of kind of when to show detail and when to pull back. I think there's a good, from the pages I've seen, it all is set in like kind of a one room situation for the most part. So I think there's a good sense of the structure of the room, kind of like holistically. If you look at all the pages, I think they come together. But I wanted to pull this one episode out to just discuss like where I think the background work is strong and where I think it needs some improvement. So when this episode starts, I found it a little confusing because of a lack of detail in the background. So it's common for when you open a scene to include an establishing shot, and I talked about it while looking at Exiled, where, you know, the opening shot, admittedly that was like the start of the comic where, you know, a more establishment happens than, say, like a scene in the middle of a story. But still, when you come into a scene, you first want to know, like, where are we? What are some important items we're looking at? It can be disorienting to come into a scene and have it just be blank background. It can take a little extra time for the reader to kind of get their bearings on what's going on. So the way that this episode starts is we have our angel character. It looks like she's walking, and then she notices the knot spider on her notebook. The reaction here is good. Like, I like the reveal that her attention has been caught by the knot spider on the book. I think that's good, and it helps with, like, it builds the actions that happen in this episode really well. But just the beginning with, like, no indication of, like, where we are, what's going on, because I think all we would need is, like, a very simple establishing of even just, like, the angel walking in and seeing the door. And I say this because later on, the rest of the room is set up. There's some important pieces in the room that come in later that are like important to how this scene plays out. Later in this scene, some things are set up just between these two, I guess you'd call it two panels. There's some great continuity that's created here that is missing from the beginning of the chapter. We through this scene, for context, the angel grabs the book, jumps up, puts it in a locked chest kind of thing that is sitting like above the door, and then drops back down. I really like this panel because we get context from what we've just seen. Like, I think it's fine that we don't see this chest before the angel jumps up and throws the notebook in, because it is kind of cool that it's this little hidden chest that's like inaccessible. It's like up here above the door. But I love how in this panel we set up that there's this door here. I'm assuming it's the main door to the bedroom. And there's some nice little details on here that are so good. I love the little curtain that's like hanging off the top of the door, because in the very next panel, we have this character walk through asking for our main character here. And I love that there's just the subtle little curtain up here hanging above the door. And I love how as you kind of read down through the panel, you see the curtain and you go, oh, okay, it's the front door. I know exactly what's happening. Even though like the camera has flipped around, we've gone from like looking here. Sorry, we've gone from looking here to then like looking from over here. It's great. It's just a nice little subtle setup where like, you know, you're not calling too much attention to it, but it's really nice and easy to follow that, like, even though the camera angle has changed, we can tell that this character has just walked through the door. And that's really missing from the start of this, because we come in not knowing anything except that our main character is walking by. There's no indication of like where they are. You know, it turns out they're standing in the bedroom, but they could be anywhere kind of thing. And then we slowly get details, like the table has shown up. We see what we're supposed to be focused on, which is the not spider, on the book. And then we get into the action where the angel grabs the book and flies it up and everything. Whereas I think if there had just been like an establishing shot where we could see the room set up, you know, we don't need the reveal of the spider on the book. We don't need the reveal of the chest above the door, but just a little indication of where we are before we get into the meat of the scene. Overall in this comic, I think there's some really good choices for when to include backgrounds and when to include more kind of abstracted out backgrounds. Like I really like it in here when we've got like the movement of the angel, like crouching down and then jumping up. Like, we don't need all these details in the background. I really like the use of the gradients. It creates like a lot of visual interest and dynamicness. It suits the setting really well of this like angel's house. And I love this little panel because our focus is just on the not spider and it's on the book and it's very not detailed. We're just focused on this little bit of action, which is really cute. And I just think it's nice. So yeah, again, really great work from this creator. Thank you, Ghost, for submitting. And everyone should go read The Not Spider. Link down below. Next up, I wanted, again, to kind of talk about continuity with backgrounds. Because I think that can be one of the most important reasons, like when considering putting in backgrounds, is you're giving, I mean, with any visual in a comic, like you're giving the information that your reader needs to understand what the heck is happening. You know, that can be a way to understand when you're putting in text as well. You're like, I can't show this visually, so I need to write it down in text form so they understand what the heck is happening. But anyways, so the comic I'm looking at right now is called Wabi, Sabi, Magic for Hire by Elizabeth Corvid. And it's a very cute comic. And I think overall the backgrounds in it are really great. I think there's overall a really great sense of like when to put in backgrounds, when to hold off and just focus on characters. There's lots of use of like great angles. The physical comedy in this comic is really great. And a lot of it uses like background elements to do the comedy because it's very physical. Yeah, so it's great. I found one page that I take issue with. So I'll start with the needs improvement for this one. It's like Bone said in the last kind of community review video we did. Like, not every page can be a banger. The one page I found an issue with is this page. Now, again, I think there's a good sense of like when to focus on character, when to focus on background. So I do like how here we have a character who's just like speaking. We're just focused on the bubble, the expression. We don't need background detail. I like how here, we're in the middle of like an action scene. Our characters are being chased by like an army of frogs. So because there's like physical movement happening, we just see them closing the door. That's all we need here. It's great. We can see the little green menace approaching under the door. But then we suddenly switch to the trapdoor here. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with these panels here, but there's something missing. So maybe this isn't a background issue. Maybe this is just like a continuity missing panel issue. But what I'm thinking here is there's a continuity issue where we jump from our character saying, I have a plan, go upstairs, hurry, to then suddenly we are up a ladder in the attic, looking down at the frogs converging, and then we see the trapdoor slam shut. I find because we don't see them running up the ladder into the attic, and the flooring that they're standing on here at this door is the same color as the flooring of the floor above that they've just run up into. It's very confusing continuity-wise. It feels like they just ran forward on the floor they're standing on and look down an open trapdoor and there's frogs coming and then they slam it shut. It feels like there hasn't been a movement to like a new floor. And I think this is because of the colors chosen for the backgrounds here. They match here. And again, I feel like there's a missing panel. Or even just some sound effects of them like tup, 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 step, 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 or something up the ladder where there's something missing here and it creates a little bit of confusion. So that is something very important to consider with your backgrounds, that when there's a big movement change, characters moving to a new space, there's lots of ways to show it, but whatever you choose, you have to be careful that like your color choices, the choice of what you're showing isn't confusing for your reader. Now, to the example of really good stuff happening in Wabi Sabi, I wanted to talk about this page. So this page comes from a sequence where one of our main characters is delivering food, going really fast, using some magic shoes. And the setup and continuity is really great because there are jumps in action. There's big jumps in how far our character has moved, but it's still really easy to follow because of some really just like simple kind of landmarks that are created, some simple like repetition, continuity of like different colors and shapes. It's really nice. So we start with our character who's like running in and we see where she's going because we see this little vendor stall here. We see a little bit of our character who is here. And then we go to the next panel and we see again the same visual of the stall, the same colors of the character who is standing here. It's very easy to tell because of the background elements and character elements, etc., that our character has gone like whoop, and this is her running past. And then we have a little jump. It helps that there's enough context going on in this page that we know our character's like running around. But we just get a little jump forward where she's clearly dropping off more and more orders to people. There's a continuity of the character movement. So like she's going this way and then she continues to go this way on the next panel. But because we know that this character is like moving so fast, you can jump kind of farther in time between panels. But I really like also the next little subtle hint is that we see our character moving on to like a little light sky blue cloudy background, and then the next panel we see it with the nice little cloudy sky blue background. Just really nice little continuity hint where even though more time has changed, our character is changing direction, we can still tell that like she's in the same area. And then I love how she just comes to a little screech stop back at the delivery place. And it also helps that our character has like changed directions and then continues that direction onto the next panel. That does really help with like continuity. And we also have like the little sky blue background. That's very nice. All the colors work. Yeah. And I just think of the use of the background elements, setting up little recognizable spots and then continuing with colors and directions and elements. It just does a really, really good job with like continuity, understanding where we are. I just think this is a really lovely example of that. So thank you to Elizabeth Corvid, and you should all go read Wabi Sabi Magic for Hire, link down below. Now for the last one, I wanted to highlight a comic with really, really lovely backgrounds and just a minor nitpick. So as I've been saying through this whole thing, establishing shots. And I think Second Sight by Michelle Grenz is a lovely example of that. Honestly, this comic, the artwork is gorgeous. The backgrounds in it are great. I also was happy to find like a black and white comic with some really great examples, because in this comic, there's really great use of textures and different values. So like, everything's grayscale, but using a lot of like good contrast, using dark colors, dark tones, light tones, different textures to really help things stand out. It's very nice. It's very well done. But yeah, so I grabbed this first scene just to show you a really nice establishing shot. Again, I really like how it kind of pulls in details, and uses like a bunch of different close-ups, pulled out shots, just to show you what's going on. It really sets up the scene really well, because we see immediately there's a for sale sign, we see the back of a moving truck, and then we pull out and we get the context of the whole truck and the for sale sign, and then we can flip around to our character who's looking at it out of a window. There's just it's really subtle. It's just some little panels up at the top, but it makes a big difference. It's just a really nice establishing shot. Everything is very clear what we're looking at. Very well done. And this comic also does a very good job with choosing when to show details and when not to. For example, I really liked this page. So this is very shortly after that first page I showed you, where this page, we have our main character standing at the window. We have her sister walking by. And I like how we set up the window here. And then we get a little bit of a close-up where we see more of the window. We get a little bit more detail here, but it doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't really matter what's happening outside the window because we're looking at our characters here. But we still have the landmarks. We know what the character's doing. We're not suddenly lost. But then when we're looking at a very emotional expression from the sister who's like, the anger is rising, I like how there's just the use of this little lightning effect in the background, where, we don't need to see the opposite wall behind the sister, even, the camera's flipped around, because we're focused on the emotion. So throughout this comic, there's lots of great examples of this, and I thought this one was very nice. Now, I'll go on to my little nitpick. I did have trouble finding some nitpicks. I think this comic is very well done background-wise. The only thing I noticed was probably on this page. It probably appears elsewhere, but this is where I found it, where the use of textures felt a little too much in the backgrounds. So stylistically, Second Sight uses, like I said, it uses a lot of texture to kind of create like depth, background, all that stuff. And so in this page, there's just this exchange between these two characters. The first two panels, I think, are great. We have this little cross-hatching background that's going on. I like how it gets a little bit darker, but you can still, well, I guess it's kind of like some stippling as well, but it still has the same vibe as the cross-hatching of the first panel. But it gets a little darker as the, emotions get a little intense. And then I find on this last panel, where we're getting the final kind of emotional reaction from our main character, it is still cross-hatching that's going on in this background, but it's very chaotic. It feels like a big jump, and used on such like a close-up panel where there's like a lot going on. We've got lots of like crisscrossing from like the shoulders of the characters, the wings of the fairy character, the hair pieces, the position of the face. Like, it's just very chaotic for this little moment where she's like agreeing like, oh yeah, I still need you. Where these backgrounds are kind of clashing, where I think just the use of something subtle, like a continuation of this, or maybe a continuation of this, I think would have worked really well. And it can feel a little boring to just use a repetitive texture. And I even in an earlier example said, like, don't be too repetitive with your backgrounds, but don't go crazy just because you think it might be boring. Does that make sense? I guess don't jump too far when you're using some stylistic stuff in the background. Keep it subtle depending on your need for the panel. I'm grasping at straws here because these pages are very strong. And I did want to show an example of it done really well. So this is a continuation from that earlier scene of the sisters arguing. I really like how this first panel has some nice little cross-hatching. There's some gradients going on. And then as we move into this more intense note from the sister, it gets like more darker and it looks more cloudy and it just looks nice. It's just a really nice continuation on it where it's still conveying like a more intense emotion. So that's it. Thank you to Michelle Grenz for submitting. Go read Second Sight. It should be linked down below. So that's everything. That's my judgment about backgrounds. If you yourself would like to have your work looked at for a different topic, please consider joining the Discord. There is a channel on there called Art and Comic Submissions where Bones and I will take them and talk about different things and give reviews like this to help people kind of learn about comic stuff. And if you would like a more personalized critique of your work where you can show us anything and we will tell you our thoughts, you can ask specific questions. We do monthly live streams where we look at our Patreon and YouTube member supporters. We look at their work that they have submitted and give some nice personalized feedback. So join the Discord, consider joining Patreon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!